Well, let's get more now from Mick Mulroy, who is a former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. He joins us from Montana in the United States. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. First of all, designating certain chapters or branches of the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organizations, how significant is this step?
So, Tom, it is a significant step. Inside the State Department, there is a ability to be designated a foreign terrorist organization, and it has three basic criteria. The first is that it's an organization, right? So you have to be able to identify it and essentially nail it down. It does have to be conducting terrorist attacks, and in the U.S., it has to be either geared toward American citizens or U.S. interests. Of course, the last category can be broadly interpreted. And that, as you mentioned correctly, gives the U.S. the ability to do things like travel restrictions and sanctions. It doesn't necessarily mean military action, which has been something that's been conflated and talked about during the issues with Venezuela right now.
Okay, for people who don't know, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded about 100 years ago in the 1920s in Egypt. And that raises the question, why 100 years after this organization was founded, has the Trump administration decided now is the time to crack down? Has there been an event or a particular issue that's prompted this, do you think?
Well, of course, we did see Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince, come to the United States recently. It might have been something that they were pushing for the United States to do. If the United States does this, it obviously will have a significant impact on these chapters. This is kind of a broad organization with different chapters. It's not necessarily all unified, but for certain chapters that are designated, this will make it very difficult for them to raise money, right? So any organization, including a terrorist organization, if that's how the U.S. and that is how the U.S. is going to view these certain chapters, raise money. That's how they survive. So this does give them the ability. It might be diplomatic pressure from Saudi Arabia, potentially from the UAE. That's speculation on my part. The other potential is that the intelligence said that several chapters were conducting terrorist attacks, and that the White House and the State Department deemed them as a contrary to U.S. national interest, therefore fitting the statute requirements that we already talked about.
Okay, since you mentioned the money, how much money does the Muslim Brotherhood have, and where does it get it from?
So I don't know how much they collect, and I imagine it's done by individual chapters, but certainly in the United States, there would be a means to collect money for these chapters. If they're not designated, obviously, as a terrorist organization, then there shouldn't be any restriction. If they are, then that would be material support to a terrorist organization, which in and of itself could be considered a crime, could get severe restrictions, penalties, financial penalties, and essentially that group could be banned from using the banking system, for example, or banned from travel, and potentially have a Department of Justice investigation opened on them. So the designation, although it doesn't include the authorized use of military force from a State Department designation, it does carry a lot of consequences financially and diplomatically.
Okay, the Muslim Brotherhood has terrorist status in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. I mean, are there any countries where they are perhaps more warmly viewed or viewed in a more friendly way? Who's supporting them?
Yeah, so that's one of the issues. Is there are chapters in countries that we have strong diplomatic relationships with. For example, Jordan, who is a great partner of the United States. How this would change our relationship with those countries is unclear. If they have a faction of their political spectrum that is deemed a foreign terrorist organization chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood, how does the U.S. then go about carrying out normal diplomatic relationship with the government writ large? That's a question I don't know the answer to, but certainly that is something that we're going to have to grapple with here in the United States to determine how that will be done, because it's just simply not the case normally where you would have what I would say a traditional terrorist organization like Al Qaeda being a substantial part of a foreign partner's government. So that is going to have to be looked at. I don't know the specific designations of the chapters, so maybe it's not as important as I'm making it out to be. But if that is the case, it's going to have to be addressed on just how the diplomatic relationships would change.
Right. So clearly the Muslim Brotherhood is the thorn in the side of a lot of countries around the world. And we've talked about countries in the Middle East, obviously the United States with this new executive order. Earlier this year, President Macron in France ordered his government to draw up some proposals to counter the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood and the spread of its influence there. I mean, that's not quite the same as banning it or deeming it to be a foreign terrorist organization. Does that sound like France and Europe in general being perhaps a little bit too soft on this kind of organization and perhaps a little naive?
Well, it really does come down to what the intelligence says. If they are a traditional political organization that's not advocating for violence, then essentially in a free democracy, that should be taken into account. I don't know what it is that this U.S. State Department's looking at now, if it indicates that they are advocating openly for violence or they're supporting groups that do, then that would indicate the need for this foreign terrorist organization, and perhaps Europe should review the same information, which is generally shared between allies like the United States and our European countries. If that's not the case, then I guess it would be more appropriate to simply watch and observe and see if it gets to that level. And it's not just specific to the Muslim Brotherhood. That would be any organization that openly advocates for violence or political means. But I don't know what the Europeans are looking at or specifically what the U.S. is looking at. It could have came from diplomatic pressure. It could have came from intelligence information or a combination of both.
Again, how much support do we think the Muslim Brotherhood has been giving to Hamas over the years?
So that's the question that I think is most acute. I don't know. I haven't been in government to look at classified reports for many years. But I do believe that those that might have been looking at that. If you provide material support, which obviously finances a group like Hamas, which is clearly a terrorist organization, then you are a material supporter, and that is against the law in most countries, and it would definitely earn you a spot on a foreign terrorist organization list. So I don't know if that's accurate, but if it is, it would indicate that that is the intelligence part of the calculation that went into making this designation.
Okay, and just how much influence does the Muslim Brotherhood have around the world? I mean, clearly there are places in the United States, pockets in the United States that have centers for Muslim people to attend. I mean, is there a feeling that perhaps some of those centers could be funded by or used by the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you think that's part of what President Trump is getting at here?
Well, as you mentioned, Tom, the organization is very old. It's had influence, particularly in Egypt, substantial influence. Some would say that they also advocate for the jihadist form of terrorism. To the extent that that is, perhaps it's certain chapters, perhaps it's people using the cover of Muslim Brotherhood to advocate for these groups. But clearly that has to be determined by an objective analysis of intelligence and then reviewed from the point of view of law enforcement and diplomacy. In this case, the U.S. State Department determining that they've reached this threshold, which is clearly laid out. So it's not subjective. There's an objective criteria for meeting this. If that's the case, then that's what happened here, and it's going to change the dynamics of how they can not only collect for different causes in the United States. If they're a designated terrorist organization, they essentially can't collect money in the United States because the individuals that would be contributing to a foreign terrorist organization, which in itself is a crime. So it's going to have a significant impact in the United States. And of course, the banking system around the world could be affected as well because of this designation.
Okay, I mean, people will remember the Muslim Brotherhood because in 2013, the president of Egypt was overthrown. He was Mohamed Morsi, and he was at the time the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. How significant an event was his overthrow? And was that sort of the beginning of the end of perhaps the influence that the Muslim Brotherhood wielded in Egypt?
I think that's a good point. That could have been the pinnacle right there, with their opportunity to run a country that obviously did not end well. And I think it's viewed in that manner. Whether that had anything to do now with the designation as a foreign terrorist organization, I don't know. But certainly, if these groups, if these chapters are essentially not just advocating for a particular political view, but a political view that's calls for the violent overthrow of a government or an attack on individual citizens, or the direct support to groups that do those things, like Al Qaeda, like ISIS, and others, then that's how they're going to earn this designation. And if that's the case, then they're going to be clamped down on all around the world. If the U.S. has the information, I imagine they're going to share it with our close allies and partners, which is known as the Five Eyes, of course, but also our European partners and our partners around the world, where they may have branches that could be doing something similar to what the U.S. is obviously accusing certain chapters of.
Okay, well, we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed. Mick Mulroy, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be with you.